Hi, I'm Louis Falgu, and welcome to the Music Breakdown. Today I'm reviewing Melodrama by Lorde. This is the second album by New Zealand pop star Lorde. She broke out in 2013 with her pretty good debut record, Pure Heroine, which I actually reviewed really early on in this channel because I privated my first video, or enlisted it, or whatever the hell I did with it, I don't even remember. Pure Heroine is looks like the first review on my channel. And I thought that record was good. Honestly, I think that it's pretty much been one of the most influential records of the decade. Pop has changed because of Pure Heroine. The sparse, cold beats that were on Lorde's debut became the norm in pop music. So obviously with her next record, I think people were really expecting her to innovate again, you know? Her and the other producer here, Jack Antoff. I'm not sure who did more of the production work, but I will say that it sounds similar to Pure Heroine in some ways, but also definitely different. The opening track, Green Light, is basically a generic electro-pop anthem. It doesn't sound like Pure Heroine at all. It's very produced, but most of the tracks here aren't. And I have to admit to being slightly disappointed by the fact that there's nothing really original or unique here like there was on Pure Heroine. It isn't as refreshing of an album as Pure Heroine was. It's not to say it's not a solid record, but I just wish it had done more in that regard. Then again, maybe that's too much to ask, because Pure Heroine and the sound of that album was kind of lightning in a bottle. Regardless, that album is better than this one. I found this album to be actually a pretty big disappointment because I had big expectations for Lorde, especially since it had been, 5 years now since her last record? And this one just isn't up to snuff. When Green Light was released as the first single, I was immensely disappointed because I thought she just sounded like any other number of English, I know she isn't English, but I mean, she sounds English on this track. She sounds like all those English electro-pop stars like, Ellie Goulding and the such. Green Light just didn't stick out to me, although I will say it's grown on me quite a fair bit. I don't think the track is great, but it certainly serves as a very good opener to the album, and even though it is generic, it's effective. And Lorde's lyrics definitely carry this track. In fact, they carry most of the album. Because the main issue with this record is just the production, where Pure Heroine managed to be minimalistic, but still engaging and interesting and even melodic at times. This album is cold and distant and uninteresting on a lot of these tracks. Take Sober, for example, which just doesn't really go anywhere. It sounds like a half-baked idea. Like, the chorus of this song is okay lyrically and, vocally, the vocal melody's fine, but nothing really happens instrumentally to lead you into that chorus, and she doesn't sing it differently enough to make it really stick or land. When the horns come in, it certainly adds some complexity, but not enough. It sounds like a pre-chorus, but it's actually the chorus. There are a lot of moments like this where the song has a section that sounds like a pre-chorus building into something big, and then it just doesn't. The Louvre is a key example. This track disappoints the hell out of me because while I really enjoy the verses on this track and the pre-chorus as well, it really creates a really tense build. It's sonically very interesting actually, and not something I expected from her. It's definitely a little different. But then the chorus is like the melody and all the instruments sound like they're being played in another room. They're packed with reverb. And then Lorde just repeats this, broadcast the boom, 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 boom hook that isn't catchy. I don't know what I'm supposed to feel with this hook, both times. What am I supposed to feel? What is it supposed to do for me? It's so cold and distant. And I may end up saying that a lot because that kind of describes the record, I feel like. Now, some of the more solid moments on the record show a lot of maturity and versatility from Lorde. For example, Liability, which is a piano ballad. And those do not frequently go over very well. Typically, these are just mediocre, trite, garbage. Very trite. I think trite's the best word to describe a piano ballad, but every now and again in pop music you get a really, really strong one, and Liability is a really strong piano ballad. Lyrically, this is just a phenomenal track, truly. The entire first verse, the idea of subverting the listener's expectations. She sings about how she's left alone to return to the only love she knows. And she talks about, you know, slow dancing with this love and trying to meet this love's demands. But then it turns out she's referring to herself, saying that the only love she really has to return to after this breakup is her. Which is another key thing to mention. This album is basically a concept album about Lorde's breakup, where Pure Heroine was basically just about how she felt alone and distant from other people, how they all talk a bunch of nonsense and she isn't interested. And that actually really complemented the production on that record, and I'd say a similar thing happens here too, because once again, she's left cold after this relationship that ended not well, apparently. And the production does reflect that once again, so I'm at least glad to say that it's sonically cohesive with the lyrics. The track Hard Feelings is a really good moment production-wise, because in this instrumental passage, it actually gets very strange and experimental. There are these industrial sound effects that come into the sound, almost like a solo of scratching metal, which is pretty crazy, really unexpected moment here. Very art poppy. And while this track is one of my favorites here, tacking Loveless onto the end of it was kind of unnecessary. It's not a bad little coda, I guess, but honestly it could have just been left off the record. I don't really know why it's here. Now, while Liability is an amazing piano ballad, like I mentioned, and honestly does wonders for the flow and theme of this record, if it were the only piano ballad, it would be brilliant. But it's not, because Rider in the Dark is also on the album. And where most piano ballads are trite and boring, this track is trite and boring. Lyrically, it's not terrible. I kind of like the idea of saying that, like, this person she was in love with, you know, began to be angry with the fact that she was singing to crowds and all that kind of stuff and writing music and now can write about him. That is a pretty cool lyrical idea, I suppose, but the track's just not very good, especially the refrain is so sparse on the piano. It's just like one chord and then she'll sing, then another chord and then she'll sing. It just doesn't do anything. And then the chorus is not very good. It's one of the weakest lyrical moments here for sure. I love you till you call the cops on me. That's just a shitty line. And it kind of ruins the flow of the album too, because like I said, Liability really should have been the only piano ballad. That would have made it a lot more effective. The track ends on Perfect Places, which is a decent pop song. I didn't really love it when I heard it as a single, and I don't really love it here, to be honest, either. The hook isn't great, but it's serviceable. It works as a final track. It certainly sums up the themes of the album. Says, you know, trying to find these perfect places, but what the fuck are perfect places anyway? You know, that's the lyrical refrain that's repeated at the very end of this track and to close out the album, and I like that a lot. But on the whole, I can't say I'm that impressed by this album, and actually I'm very disappointed by it. I don't think it's a huge misstep, I just don't think it's all that strong. I don't think it's all that good of an album. And I would say that Lorde is going to need to have some kind of change in her sound on the next album to really nail something like this. Because when she does try new things, it works well. But when she sticks to the same kind of stuff on Pure Heroine, she shows that it's already kind of tired, and she just had a better knack for it back then, I suppose. So overall, I give Melodrama a decent 6.5 out of 10. While the album is conceptually interesting and lyrically phenomenal, production-wise, instrumentally, it just leaves a lot to be desired for me, and I'm left feeling, once again, cold. But I do look forward to her next record, and I hope it doesn't take as long to come out. So we'll see then, I guess. Bye, guys.
You're a little much for me. You're a liability. You're a little much for me. So they pull back, make other plans. I understand. I'm a liability.